Fake HOA enforcers. Try to take my kid Navy SEAL. Dad breaks their knees, leaves them crawling. They tried to kidnap my daughter over a supposed HOA fine. Yes, two goons claiming to be compliance officers shoved my little Emily into an SUV, all because Karen decided my front yard bird bath was non-conforming. By the time the sheriff arrived, let's just say those enforcers weren't standing tall anymore. They were crawling, and Karen, she was about to learn why you never mess with a Navy SEAL's family. You know what they say? No good deed goes unpunished. I moved to Willow Creek Estates for the quiet, the white picket fences, the block parties with too much potato salad, and the promise of peaceful retirement after 12 years as a Navy SEAL. Instead, I got Karen Whitlock, self-appointed queen of the HOA clipboard, permanently fused to her left-hand purse, dog under her right arm, and an ego bigger than Texas. Officially, the HOA was dissolved last year after a board scandal over misused funds. Spoiler alert, Karen. But unofficially, Karen never gave up power. She invented a new title, Community Standards Liaison Translation, Dictator with No Leash. Now, to be fair, I tried to keep my head down. My 8-year-old daughter, Emily, and I just wanted a fresh start. She'd been through enough after losing her mom. All we cared about was peace and maybe a few hummingbirds visiting the bird bath I'd set up in our front yard. Big mistake. One Saturday morning, Emily and I were refilling the bird bath when Karen came striding up like she owned the sidewalk. Mr. McBride, she said, peering over her bifocals like I was a delinquent teenager. Your decorative water feature is in violation of Code 72, unauthorized wildlife attractants. I blinked. Karen, it's a bird bath. The birds like it, she sniffed. Exactly. And birds bring bird droppings. This affects curb appeal. I kept my cool. Years in combat zones will do that to a man. The old HOA rules don't apply anymore. You'd need a community vote to enforce anything. Her lips curled into what I assume she thought was a smile. Oh, I have my ways of enforcing things. 2 days later, I got a fine in the mail, $500, not from a real HOA. Just an official-looking letter from Willow Creek Compliance Board, which, as it turns out, only had one member, Karen. I laughed, ignored it. Karen escalated. First, she left notes taped to my door in bright pink paper. Final warning. Then she reported me to animal control for unlicensed wildlife care. They laughed her out of the office, so she got creative. Thursday afternoon, I was under the truck changing the oil when Emily came running out, tears in her eyes. Daddy, there's men at the door. They say we have to go. I wiped my hands and stood up. 2 men in reflective vests were on my porch. Not utility workers, no badges. One held a clipboard, the other had a walkie-talkie and a mean smile. We're with Willow Creek Compliance Enforcement, Vest Number 1 announced. Your unpaid fines have triggered a child safety review. Under community bylaw extensions, we have the authority to remove minors from unsafe environments. I stared. You're what? Vest Number 2 stepped forward. You can contest it later. For now, the child comes with us. That's when I saw the black SUV parked at the curb, rear door open, as if they thought this was going to be easy. I was calm. Too calm, probably. You have paperwork, ma'am. Karen approved it. That's all we need. No judge's order, sir. You're obstructing compliance officers. Step aside. I didn't step aside. In fact, I stepped forward. Here's the thing about Navy SEAL training. It doesn't just teach you how to fight. It teaches you how to recognize amateurs. These guys were amateurs, thugs hired by Karen. Maybe they thought the retired dad with a bad back would be an easy mark. They thought very, very wrong. Vest Number 2 reached for Emily. That's when the world flipped on upside down. Literally for them. Let's just say by the time the county sheriff rolled up 10 minutes later, those compliance officers weren't standing tall anymore. They were on the ground screaming about their knees. And Karen, she was already dialing her lawyer too late. Because what none of them knew was this. I wasn't just a SEAL. I was also a licensed security consultant, and I had just triggered a countermeasure that would unravel every shady thing Karen had built. 15 minutes after I left 2 compliance officers crying in my driveway like toddlers who lost their sippy cups. The police rolled up, 3 squad cars, lights flashing. Officer Mills stepped out first, tall built like a linebacker with that I've seen too much suburbia nonsense look. He and I knew each other loosely. His niece was on Emily's soccer team. He took one glance at the scene, 2 men moaning, a black Escalade with no plates. Karen pacing, rehearsing whatever nonsense she thought would get her out of this, and me, standing calm, arms folded. Emily tucked safely behind me. Mike. Mills nodded, eyes narrowing. What happened? Karen jumped in before I could speak. Officer, arrest him. He assaulted HOA officials during an authorized child welfare intervention. Stop. Mills held up a hand. Pure dad mode. You quiet. Then he turned to me. Your version. I laid it out short and sweet. 2 men grabbed my daughter. I intervened. They have no legal authority. Their fake IDs were in the grass where they dropped them. Officer Mills turned to the 2 groaning men. Names, Jim Kellers and Brad Dixon, one whimpered. We work for the HOA enforcement team. There is no HOA enforcement team, Mills growled. That's when Mills did something I respected. He called for backup, not more officers, but a county child welfare investigator. Someone real. Someone who could untangle the web, Karen was spinning. Karen tried to interrupt again. It was an emergency relocation action, authorized under bylaw, section 914B. Officer Mills didn't even look at her this time. Ma'am, unless bylaw 914B involves felony kidnapping, you are going to want to stop talking. The 2 men were cuffed. Karen wasn't not yet, but the storm clouds were forming. As that night, once things calmed and Emily was asleep with a baseball bat next to her bed. Her idea. I dug into the Maple Hollow HOA documents. Here's where my Navy intel training kicked in. I wasn't just some muscle with a sharp right hook. I specialized in reading between the lines. Contracts, bylaws, the fine print most people ignore. And oh boy, did Karen's fine print stink like last week's tuna casserole. Violation number 1. The HOA's child welfare intervention policy didn't exist. Karen had added a draft version to the bylaws without a community vote. Illegal as heck. Violation number 2, the so-called enforcement division wasn't just fake. Karen had paid the 2 goons under the table. No W-2s, no tax records. Classic tax fraud. Violation number 3. Her recent push for family relocation authority had been slipped into a December HOA newsletter, the kind most people threw out with junk mail, and even then it had no legal weight. By midnight, I had a 3-page report ready, not just for the police, for the HOA board, and most importantly for my attorney. Her name was Rachel Tran, HOA specialist, former prosecutor known as the Velvet Guillotine. She didn't just win HOA cases. She ended them. I handed her the 3-page report plus the security footage from my doorbell cam showing the 2 idiots grabbing Emily. Rachel smiled like a cat who just found a laser pointer. I love when they make it this easy, she said. Mike, they violated your parental rights, broke HOA regulations, committed attempted kidnapping, and best part, Karen's tampering with the bylaws opens up civil liability for fraud. She paused, tapping her pen on the table. And once we prove misuse of HOA funds to pay those fake enforcers, she'll be lucky to manage a lemonade stand without an ankle bracelet. Just when I thought Karen would turtle up, hire some shady lawyer, and pray this all went away, she went full nuclear. 2 days later, a notice of foreclosure proceedings showed up taped to my front door. According to the notice, the HOA was initiating lien foreclosure on my property for excessive fines, supposedly unpaid violation fees totaling $11,750. Yeah, 11 grand for what you ask. Unauthorized flagpole again. Aggressive landscaping. Noise violations for military-style training, exercises in the backyard, aka Emily and I playing catch. And my personal favorite, child endangerment due to non-compliant play equipment. In other words, pure fiction. But here's the thing about fiction. It falls apart under cross-examination. Rachel Tran smiled when she saw the notice. They just walked into the trap. We've got them for fraudulent fines, abusive lien processes, and harassment. You're going to own their sorry little HOA by the time we're done. As the legal gears started turning, something interesting happened. Neighbors who'd once waved politely but kept their heads down. They started stopping by Mrs. Dupree from 3 doors down brought over a casserole and whispered, "She fined me $200 for having a mailbox flag shaped like a cardinal. I've been afraid to fight her until now." Mr. Alvarez, a retired Marine, nodded at me while mowing his lawn. "Got your 6th brother, always thought Karen was nuts." Even sweet old Mr. Rosenthal, who rarely left his porch, dropped off a manila envelope full of HOA newsletters he'd saved for years. Proof that Karen had been slipping in unauthorized bylaw changes without votes. The more Karen tightened her grip, the more people slipped through her fingers. And Rachel, she wasn't just filing a lawsuit, she was drafting a recall petition. Karen wasn't stupid. Ruthless? Yes, but not stupid. She tried to shore up her defenses. She called an emergency HOA meeting. Board members were told not to speak without her approval. Residents were told the meeting would address security concerns and dangerous behavior from non-compliant homeowners. She meant me. But guess who else showed up? Officer Mills off duty, but very interested. Rachel Tran clipboard in hand. 3 news reporters from the local affiliate and nearly 60 residents, some holding Recall Karen signs. Karen strutted to the podium like a dictator, clinging to her last thread of power. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, recent events have been exaggerated by malicious individuals seeking to undermine our community standards. We must stay united. Karen, I stepped forward, calm, controlled, holding a copy of my lawsuit and the recall petition. This community isn't yours to command. I dropped the papers on the table. The thud echoed through the silent room. Rachel added, and the sheriff's department will be serving you with a formal notice of investigation for bylaw fraud and misuse of funds. Karen's face went pale as skim milk. If you think this was wild, wait till you hear what Karen did next. And trust me, it involves a golf cart, chase, a shredding machine, and a subpoena. You'd think wrong. If anything, she doubled down. By the end of that community meeting where Rachel Tran dropped the lawsuit like a bombshell, most folks thought Karen would resign quietly. Maybe issue one of those. I was only trying to help the community fake apologies. Nope. By sunrise the next day, every mailbox in Willow Creek had a fresh, bright yellow flyer. Due to ongoing disruptions caused by certain residents with violent histories and questionable military backgrounds, I'm Karen Whitlock, Community Standards Liaison. I'm enacting a safety protocol lockdown. All children must remain indoors unless accompanied by a certified HOA safety warden. Failure to comply will result in community fines and possible escalation to county authorities. I actually laughed out loud. Certified HOA safety warden. She'd invented her own private police now. Emily peeked over my shoulder. Daddy, does this mean I can't go to soccer today? I ruffled her hair. Honey, the only thing this means is Karen's finally lost what little marbles she had left. By noon they appeared. 4 guys in mismatched security uniforms riding around in, I kid you not, golf carts. One even had flashing orange lights duct taped to the roof. Another was wearing a paintball mask. They cruised up and down the streets like mall cops on parade. One neighbor joked they looked like a Dollar Tree version of SWAT. I didn't laugh because these weren't just clowns. They were dangerous clowns. They stopped kids riding bikes, questioned teenagers, walking dogs, and tried to escort Mrs. Alvarez's grandson back inside her house when he went to get the mail. By day's end, Karen's safety patrol had written $3,000 worth of fake citations. And who was collecting the money? Karen's PayPal, of course. Officer Mills came by my place that evening. Mike, I don't even know where to start. We've got reports from 10 different families about harassment. I handed him a fresh file Rachel Tran had compiled. It gets better. The safety wardens aren't licensed security. They're not even bonded. And 2 of them, criminal records, assault, and impersonating law enforcement. Mills ran a hand down his face. That explains why they got so jumpy when we showed up. Then he leaned in. Karen's pulling strings at the mayor's office. Somebody's slowing down the warrant process. I wasn't surprised corrupt small-town officials and power-hungry HOA queens go together like BBQ ribs and heartburn. But I had an ace up my sleeve. That weekend, the Patriot Riders arrived, 30 veterans, Army, Navy, Marines, even a few Air Force boys we decided to let tag along. They rolled into Willow Creek on motorcycles and pickup trucks, American flags flying. Not to start trouble, just to stand watch. Every time Karen and safety wardens approached a kid or neighbor, a Patriot Rider just happened to be nearby. Recording within 48 hours, the fake citation stopped. Karen tried calling the sheriff again. Mills told her politely to stop wasting county resources, and that quote, "Veterans enjoying the sunshine isn't a crime." But Karen wasn't done. The HOA board, what was left of it, had finally agreed to release the financial records Rachel Tran requested for the lawsuit. Those records were kept at the old Willow Creek Community Center. A simple public handover, easy, transparent. Or so we thought. The morning of the scheduled release, the community center's fire alarm went off. By the time the fire department arrived, smoke was billowing out the side door. No, the building wasn't on fire. Karen had wheeled in an industrial shredder and was feeding stacks of financial documents into it like a woman possessed. Literally, her gloves were stained with ink and toner. Several board members, including poor Mr. Rosenthal, stood by in shock. Rachel arrived 5 minutes later. She didn't say a word, just filmed the whole thing. Karen shouted at her, These records are private. You have no right. Rachel calmly replied, they became public the moment you started charging unlawful fines and misusing community funds. That's when the county investigator, finally freed from mayoral interference, arrived with a search warrant. Karen tried to flee out the back door. She didn't make it past two Patriot riders who just happened to be stretching their legs by the exit. Karen was arrested on the spot. Charges. Oh, just a few small things. Destruction of evidence, fraudulent fines and extortion, harassment, hiring unlicensed security, attempted kidnapping by proxy, tampering with HOA bylaws, tax fraud. When they cuffed her, she still tried to protest. I was protecting the community. I was enforcing standards. You'll all thank me when property values plummet because of him. She pointed at me. Officer Mills didn't even blink. Ma'am, I think the only thing dropping today is your bail eligibility. As they loaded her into the cruiser, Karen screamed, this isn't over, but we all knew it was. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Rachel Tran outlined the settlement plan. Full dissolution of Karen's self-created enforcement rules, refunds to every resident fined unlawfully, a community election to replace the entire board, a motion to ban any future unilateral enforcement actions without supermajority votes. The residents voted unanimously in favor. Mr. Rosenthal stood and announced he'd like to nominate someone for the new HOA president. Mike McBride, he said. The only man who stood up for this neighborhood when the rest of us were too scared. I politely declined. I didn't fight for power. I told them I fought for my daughter. For all of our kids, the crowd applauded. Even the mayor, under his own investigation, now kept his mouth shut for once. A week later, Emily had her soccer game. No more fake patrols, no more yellow flyers, just parents cheering, kids playing. As Emily ran up for a hug after the game, she asked Daddy, does this mean the bad lady's gone for good? I smiled. Let's just say she's on a long time out, and in my pocket, the court summons for Karen's trial. She was facing not just fines, but possible jail time. Her house was up for sale to pay restitution. Willow Creek was free, and justice was right on schedule. Karen Whitlock. She wasn't one of them. You'd think getting arrested shredding financial records charged with fraud, harassment, and conspiracy would make a person lay low. Nope. As she was cuffed and hauled off, she declared, I will clear my name and expose the lies. Her lawyer, a sweaty, balding man named Larry Peters, who looked like he just Googled how to defend HOA fraud the night before, promised the same. So when court day came, everyone grabbed popcorn. Literally, Rachel Tran even brought a custom-printed popcorn bucket that said Karen's Courtroom, Meltdown Season Finale. The county courthouse was packed. Willow Creek residents sat shoulder to shoulder. Reporters from the local news lined the back. Even the Patriot riders were there, American flag patches gleaming. Karen arrived in a stiff navy skirt suit that looked 2 sizes too small, dragging her clipboard like a kid clutches a security blanket. She glared at everyone like we were on trial. Her safety wardens nowhere to be seen. 2 had flipped to the prosecution in exchange for plea deals. I sat up front beside Rachel and Officer Mills. Emily wasn't there, of course. She was at school, blissfully unaware that today would finally slam the door shut on Karen's HOA reign of terror. Larry Peters opened with a speech that would have made a soap opera writer blush. Ladies and gentlemen, my client is not a criminal. She's a hero, a brave woman forced to defend community values against dangerous elements, namely Mr. Michael McBride and his violent, unregulated friends. Several jurors visibly rolled their eyes. Peters waved a finger at me. This man assaulted law-abiding citizens. He intimidated the HOA board. He weaponized military connections to terrorize good suburban families. Mills whispered, is he describing you or Batman? Rachel almost choked on her popcorn. Then Karen stood. She wasn't supposed to speak yet, but Karen never let rules stop her, Your Honor. I was upholding standards. These people refused to comply. They mocked safety protocols. And Mr. McBride's combat training made him a public threat. Judge Callahan, an older man with silver hair and a no-nonsense stare, banged his gavel. Ms. Whitlock, sit down. You'll have your turn. Interrupt again, and I'll hold you in contempt, Karen huffed, but obeyed for now. Then it was Rachel's turn. She stood with calm, measured confidence. Unlike Peters' dramatic theatrics, she didn't need volume. She had facts. Your Honor, the evidence will show. Whitlock orchestrated a fraudulent HOA entity to impose unauthorized fines, hired unlicensed personnel with criminal backgrounds, and manipulated community regulations for personal financial gain. She clicked a remote. A PowerPoint appeared. Slide 1, the fake bylaws. Karen created slide 2. Bank records showing fines deposited into Karen's personal accounts. Slide 3, photos of Karen shredding documents at the community center. The jury leaned forward. Rachel clicked again. Slide 4, the so-called safety warden's criminal histories. Slide 5, screenshots of Karen threatening residents with legal action for made-up infractions. Slide 6, body cam footage of Officer Mills confronting Karen's hired goons at my house. Rachel's voice stayed steady. Finally, the prosecution will demonstrate that Miss Whitlock's abuse escalated to unlawful restraint of a minor. McBride's daughter, an act designed to coerce compliance through fear. The room went still. Even Karen's lawyer looked queasy. But Rachel wasn't done, Your Honor. We have newly recovered emails obtained via subpoena from Ms. Whitlock's personal server. The judge nodded. Proceed slide 7, an email Karen sent to her safety wardens. Use the citations aggressively, especially families supporting McBride. Make an example of them. We'll recoup costs once they sell slide 8, another email to Larry Peters. If the McBride kid leaves the neighborhood voluntarily, our problem solves itself. Brainstorm legal angles to make that happen. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. I felt my fists clench. They'd targeted my child. Not just harassment. This was premeditated psychological warfare. Rachel let the silence hang, then calmly added, "We rest our case, the defense had nothing." Larry Peters mumbled something about misinterpretations and overzealous community management. Then Karen snapped. She stood face flushed. "It's all lies. You can't trust them. He's ex-military. They protect their own." "This is a conspiracy," the judge glared. "Ms. Whitlock, sit down or—" But she didn't. She pointed at the jury. "They don't understand what it's like to protect a community, to be the only one brave enough to enforce order. Without me, Willow Creek will fall into chaos. You need people like me." At that moment, the projector clicked one last time. Slide 9, a photo of Willow Creek's community park now bustling with families, kids playing, and Patriot riders grilling burgers. No HOA patrols, no citations. Just peace, Rachel spoke softly. "That's the chaos Miss Whitlock claims to fear." The jury stared at the photo, then at Karen, then back at the photo, and that's when Karen made her biggest mistake. She tried to run before the bailiff could react. Karen bolted for the side exit, clipboard in hand, shoes clacking wildly, a crazed look in her eyes. 2 steps from the door, she tripped over her own handbag. The clipboard went flying. It hit the ground with a dramatic crack, the symbolic sound of Karen's last shred of authority snapping in two. The bailiff pounced. Karen shrieked. The courtroom erupted, not in panic but cheers. Even the judge couldn't suppress a smirk. It didn't take long. The jury returned in less than 40 minutes. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Karen Whitlock, guilty on all counts." Judge Callahan nodded. "Ms. Whitlock, I hereby sentence you to 3 years county incarceration for fraud and harassment, restitution to affected Willow Creek residents, a permanent ban from holding any community or HOA leadership positions." Karen slumped. The clipboard lay shattered at her feet. The reign of Karen was officially over. Outside the courthouse, neighbors gathered. No more sides, no more fear. Just relief. The local news captured it all. Rachel addressed the cameras. This wasn't just about one woman. It was about standing up to abuse of power, about protecting our families and restoring trust. Today, Willow Creek took back its voice. Behind her, the Patriot Riders unfurled a banner. "Justice served families united, Karen free zone." That evening back at home, Emily sat on my lap. "Is the bad lady gone forever?" I smiled. "She's going somewhere with very strict HOA rules. Now it's called jail." Emily giggled. "Do they have clipboards there?" I winked. "Not anymore." Rachel stopped by with pizza. Mr. Rosenthal brought ice cream. Neighbors who once hid behind blinds now gathered in the yard chatting freely. Willow Creek wasn't just safe again. It was whole again. As the sun set, the distant sound of kids playing echoed through the neighborhood. Peace. The kind you fight for, the kind worth keeping. Well, sort of. Rachel had kept the shattered remains of Karen's once mighty clipboard. At the community's 4th of July BBQ, she framed it behind glass with a gold plate. "In memory of tyranny, here lies Karen's last power move." Every guest at the BBQ posed for a photo with it. The laughter was healing, but the real justice had been more serious and far-reaching. The county civil division had ordered Karen to pay $230,000 in restitution to families she'd fined illegally, $75,000 for emotional distress to the 4 families she'd targeted for child behavioral citations, and a personal apology to the McBrides. As she tried to read the apology in court, it lasted 2 sentences before she blamed fake news and got another contempt charge. Her real estate license, revoked her property management company, dissolved her once massive network of political cronies, abandoned ship like rats on the Titanic. And the biggest poetic twist, Karen's own house was foreclosed. Not because anyone forced her out, because she couldn't pay the mounting legal fees and penalties. When the property finally went on the market, the new buyer turned out to be the Willow Creek Neighborhood Fund. Yeah, we bought it, turned it into the new Willow Creek Community Center, first event. A kids' safety day run by Officer Mills, who was officially promoted after the case. Naturally, the HOA was obliterated. Well, legally speaking, it was disbanded pending reorganization. But to us, it was obliterated. In its place, the residents voted to create a Community Standards Council. No paid positions, term limits, public meetings recorded and posted online. All fines and fees approved by majority vote, not imposed by a wannabe dictator. Rachel was offered the council chair position. She declined. I'm a lawyer, not a politician. But I'll gladly write your bylaws, and this time they'll be bulletproof. And they were a couple of retired judges from the county even volunteered to help. The person who'd suffered the most quietly had been Emily. For weeks after Karen's safety wardens tried to intimidate her, she had nightmares, didn't want to ride her bike alone, wouldn't even speak at school when adults in charge raised their voices. But now Emily was back on her bike, back at soccer. And when a school counselor asked if she still felt afraid of grown-ups who act unfairly, Emily smiled and said, "No, my dad took care of them, and my community fixed the rules. If that doesn't put a lump in your throat, you might be a Karen." The 4th of July BBQ was more than just burgers and fireworks. It was a victory party. Families who once avoided each other out of fear now chatted freely. Kids who'd been scolded for non-compliant yard toys played in the open park. Flags flew proudly, all shapes, sizes, and colors. Even the HOA's biggest former supporters came around. At one point, old Mr. Davis, who once backed Karen because rules keep order, approached me with a cold beer. "Mike, I was wrong. We all were. I thought strictness was safety. Turns out real safety is fairness, and folks like you willing to fight for it." We shook hands. That handshake meant more than any court ruling. As the sun set, Rachel and I stood near the grill, watching the kids light sparklers. She nudged me. "You know you could run for the council." I laughed. "Nah, I fight the battles. I don't make the rules." But something else had taken root. I started a nonprofit, Operation Fair Play, a free legal resource center helping families fight HOA abuse across the state. Rachel volunteered legal hours. Officer Mills taught workshops on residents' rights. Even Emily got involved, helping make flyers that read, "Never let a clipboard bully your family." Oh, and Karen. Her last known address was a rented condo in a complex without an HOA. Neighbors reported she tried to form a volunteer community standards patrol. It lasted a week. The landlord threatened eviction. Residents pelted her mailbox with plastic flamingos. Justice comes in many forms. We finally got to live the life we'd moved to. Willow Creek for family cookouts, neighborhood movie nights, yard flamingos proudly allowed, and a community that polices itself not with fines but with fairness. As the fireworks exploded overhead that 4th of July, Emily leaned against me and whispered, "Dad, do the bad people always lose?" I smiled. "Not always right away, but in the end, yeah, especially when people stick together." Rachel raised her beer. To the day the clipboard cracked, everyone cheered. And somewhere out there in a sad little condo without an HOA, a certain Karen probably heard the echo. Karen didn't seize power overnight. She rose because good people didn't show up. Busy folks skipped HOA meetings. People shrugged at petty rules. No one pushed back until it was too late. If your HOA has more clipboards than compassion, start attending those meetings. Vote, speak up, be present, because when you don't, the Karens will. If there's one thing Rachel drilled into everyone, document, document, document. Every fine, every notice, every friendly visit from Karen's fake enforcers. Because when it was time to fight back, our proof spoke louder than her lies. If you're dealing with an HOA bully, keep a paper trail. Their arrogance depends on you staying silent and undocumented. HOA tyrants divide. They pit neighbor against neighbor with fear and fines. But once we, the residents, started talking to each other, Karen's power cracked like her precious clipboard. Isolation breeds control. Connection breeds change. And invite your neighbors over. Swap stories. Share coffee or stronger stuff. That's how you stop a Karen before she starts Rachel's legal skills. Game changer. So were Officer Mills and the local judge who quietly advised us Karens win. when folks think rules are rules. But many HOA rules are illegal, unenforceable, or applied selectively, which is unlawful. If you don't know your rights, find someone who does. And if you don't know where to start, comment below. There's a whole community here ready to share advice. If you've made it this far, I bet you've got your own battle scars. Did your HOA fine you for your flagpole, for your kid's sidewalk chalk, for daring to grow a tomato plant? Drop your HOA horror story in the comments. Your story could help someone else realize they're not crazy, they're not alone, and Karens can be defeated. Comment your story below and like this video. If you believe in standing up to HOA tyrants, subscribe for more stories where the little guy wins and clipboard bullies lose. Because justice might be slow, but trust me, it always shows up eventually, and sometimes it shows up carrying a Navy SEAL and a broken clipboard.